Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you all for joining us on another episode of the Gentle Art of Crushing It. Today, I have Jim Remley with us. And so Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you start us off by please just telling the audience a bit about yourself, what you're up to, what do you do, specialize in, and then maybe share something that with our guests that most people wouldn't know about you.
Sure. So thank you for having me on the podcast, first of all. I'm 35 years in the business. I started when I was 19, college dropout, and did pretty well my first year or two in the business. I got listed in the top 1% of agents, listed 150 properties in my second year. Opened my first company at age of 24, grew that to 17 offices, becoming the largest independent company in Oregon. Sold that in 2006, went to work for NAR for 10 years, taught all the designation programs, including the ABR class, which all of your listeners should be taking. It's free right now. NAR's rolled that out for free as we're going through the SPIRE representation challenges that we got. Then I circled back. I went helped another guy open a company in Southern Oregon, took that from 30 agents to 250 agents over about 10 years, from $100 million in business to $1.4 billion in sales a year, 3,000 transactions a year, and got listed in the top 500 companies in America. So that's my claim to fame. Today, I'm a brokerage coach primarily. I coach agents and brokers, but my focus is really on brokers and team leaders. And my real specialization is recruiting experienced agents. So I put the emphasis on recruiting.
I love that. That is an awesome, resume right there, and huge, victories there. So kudos to you. And
Thank you.
let me ask you this, because I guess I've never thought to ask, and it's got to be a dumb question, but I'm okay. I'm gonna roll with it anyway. So, in the commercial world, we call their sort of agents a broker, right? And then in the residential, the broker is the one who's all the agents hang the license with, right?
Sure.
And so when we're talking brokers right now, that's mostly what you focus on, or both, sides there, or
So I coach agents. And I coach them on mostly sales. I've done that for years, but my real focus is on brokerage owners, people that own a brokerage that have agents underneath them. And then I also help team leaders that want to grow their teams out. So that's kind of my specialization.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. And sort of my understanding that is one strategy that you can go with, is just build your team out, right? And obviously you're going to want to be doing well, but that's really cool.
Yeah. It's definitely a strategy that is attractive to a lot of people. I mean, from the outside in, it looks like, oh, that's easy, but like anything, it's not.
Yeah, and that's the sort of the catch, right? That's why we got to be careful with shiny objects. They're hooks, right? And sometimes, and I feel like what's most important is we find one that we kind of enjoy doing, because we have to stick with that long term. Just because people are excelling in it doesn't mean that you're going to, and you can definitely, but jumping ship every couple of months, which I did, for years. I feel really grounded now, but that's a big challenge. So, I'm glad that you brought that up.
For sure.
Let me ask you this. I think this is a really fun question. It's also very important. And that is, how it's sort of twofold. Where and how have you found success? And, how do you define success?
Well, success, I think, changes for everybody over time. I mean, when I was a young, 19-year-old agent getting into the business, success for me was making probably $100,000 a year would have been like a huge monster success for me. And then back in the early 90s, $100,000 was a lot different than it is today, right? So for me, that was like my measurement of success, was a benchmark of money. As I grew older and a little bit more wiser, it's not, money has no meaning really. It's the meaning we attach to it. And really money does have is what it can buy for you. Right. And so it's really defining your why and having absolute clarity. The biggest missing component for most agents is that They're waking up trying to become insta famous. They're waking up trying to become instant 7-figure agents, but there's no meaning behind it. They just want it because they think they should want it. And this is where you get drilled down into goal setting. So if we're sitting down and you're doing goal setting with me, I'll say, okay, what is your number? But then why do you want to hit the number? What does that number do for you? So if you want to make $100,000, $500,000 next year, what are you going to do with that 500 grand? How's it going to change your life? One of my best coaches in the world told me years ago, and it was really the difference between me at that point making maybe $500,000 a year versus making $1 million a year is, well, what is the difference? How's it going to change how you live? And the reality is making $1 million versus making 500,000. Yeah, it'll change how you live a little bit, but it's not really going to change how you live that much, right? So then you got to say, well, what is the meaning of that money really then? What is it going to secure a legacy for my family? Am I going to buy investment properties? Am I going to be able to put my kids through college? What is the true meaning behind what you're trying to do here? And once you identify that why, that really driving purpose, that's what's going to ultimately fire you up in the morning and get you completely motivated and have clarity on your goals. The worst motivated agent out there, the people that are struggling, that are burning out, that are like, oh my gosh, this sucks. And they're super successful. You see some agents that are like super successful and they're miserable. They have divorces. Their relationships are terrible. Their kids hate their guts. Why is that? It's because that they're not understanding what they're doing. And so what they're doing is they wake up every morning. They said, I did 10 million last year. I need to do 20 million this year without any why behind it, just because they want to be number one. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about your numbers except for you. So you got to figure out the why. That's the most important thing that every agent should do. And also understand this, your why will change. So when I was 19, my why was making 100 grand. Once you do that, then what's your next why, right? And what is it going to be next for you, and why do you want it? Those are things to evaluate every single year as you're growing your business.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. The introspection as well. Like, how do you want your life to look 5-10 years down the road? Why are you doing what you're doing? And I think it's so valuable. But I also think, like my parents' generation, I think on average, they didn't think about that very much. My generation, the same. Seems like it does seem to me like there is more entrepreneurs out there nowadays than there was a while back. It could just be that social, like in the 90s, for example, it could just be that social media is exposing a lot more of them. But it also seems like there's an awareness, there. But I think it's always been incredibly important that we understand our why. And we can't do it yesterday. We can't do it in the future, but might as well do it now, right?
Right. And, I'll give you an example of this. I had a gal come to one of my career seminars that I did, and she was a waitress. And she said, Jim, I'm thinking about getting my real estate license. Do you think I should get my license? I said, well, tell me your situation. She said, well, I'm just breaking up with my husband. So I'm getting divorced. I've got 3 kids. And I just think I need a path to put myself on a career path that, will be something that'll have a future for me. And I said, well, let me give you the ups and downs. I told you the ups and downs of sales versus having a traditional job. And at the end of the day, she pulled the trigger and she got her license. And within the first year, this is a long time ago, she did $9.5 million in her first year, wow, which even today would be a great first year.
Yes, that's a good year.
So, but here's the difference. She had a tremendous, powerful why. She had to pay off all the debts her ex-husband had racked up, and she had to feed her kids. So that was the powerful why motivator. And so I always tell that story for people that are like, I don't know my why. Well, you better figure it out, right? Because that's super important.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. And so let me ask you this, sort of, now that we're on the sort of the subject of, success. What would you say is one of your favorite successes that you achieved in life? It could be monetary, it could be something physical, it could be, spending time with your family, but you mind sharing with us, what that was for you?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that, I was one of the first agents, maybe in the country, not in the entire country, but one of the first definitely in the early 90s to start a team in the state of Oregon, for sure. And so it was me and another guy, and we had an assistant. Everybody's like, why are you guys teaming up? They didn't understand the concept of a team. Nobody did back then. And so they're like, are you guys romantically involved? What do you mean you're working with this other guy? This doesn't make any sense at all. And so they just couldn't get their minds around it. But eventually we started to take market share and we started to grow really rapidly. And so I think I'm very proud of the fact that we were kind of ahead of the curve there in building out a team and understanding the power that, he had strengths that I didn't have, and I had strengths that he didn't have. And when you marry those together, and you can actually grow a company or organization that's bigger than you would have been individually. And I think that that's something I was really proud of doing. And we grew and we became just our little team. When we measure our performance against every brokerage in the country, in our county, we were second in volume. So eventually we broke off and opened our first company, and then that grew up to 17 offices over time. But that's definitely something I'm proud of.
Yeah, that's huge. In there, is a great lesson. A lot of them in there. And so for me, I really picked up on when you said he had strengths where you had weaknesses and vice versa. I have partners in some deals right now, and for me, working with a team has been a game changer. It's been so helpful for me, so valuable. And so let me ask you this: did your thoughts throughout the years change on partnerships? Are you a fan of partnerships? Are you still a fan of? You're still obviously a fan of team building, right? But
I think team building. Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of team building for some agents. It's not right for everybody. Mm-hmm. I think the most profitable agents in America are not parts of teams. Shockingly, the most profitable agents, the one that take the most home to their family, is a single agent with a great full-time assistant and maybe a transaction coordinator. They're the ones that net the most dollars. Okay. So the teams, though, the attraction to teams is that I'm going to be able to maybe have more of almost a corporate kind of structure to my group. But I'll tell you, here's what generally doesn't work. What generally doesn't work is two people coming together to work together and be like a 50-50 partnership. Almost never works, because you're not getting married. This is a business relationship. And so whenever I'm coaching these kinds of people, I'll say, the first thing you have to do if you're going to form a team as a 50-50 partnership is that you got to have an exit strategy. So let's call it a prenup. So that it's not if, it's when the team dissolves that you'll have this structure of, here's how we're going to break apart the team. Because it's not a matter of if. You're not going to be married for the next 50 years to this person. This might be 5 years, might be 10 years, but it's going to break up at some point. So let's figure it out now. That's number one. But the best team structure, if you're going to run a team, in my opinion, is that you have an alpha on top. Let's call your alpha the rainmaker. That's the person that brings the leads, that brings the energy, brings the passion. They've been a top producer. And then beneath them, on top, below this pyramid, you start building out some models. So you're going to have somebody that's roles, I should say. So somebody generally is going to be your admin person, first hire. Then you're going to maybe have a transaction coordinator. It could be a virtual one, or it could be on your team. And then you're going to have maybe a buyer's agent, maybe a showing agent, and maybe eventually move up to having a listing coordinator, maybe even a social and / marketing person on your team. That would be a pretty large, or not large, but a pretty good size, small to medium sized team. And then you could grow it out from there. But that's like the typical best case team structure, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that. And absolutely. I think that as you were starting to talk about that, what was popping in my head, or talking about teams and partnerships, was like assigning the roles. And I think the sooner you do that, the better. Like even up front, before the partnership is created, right? Or the team is people are signing on to join the team, right? So, so let me ask you this. Sort of, we spoke a little bit about some of your successes and lessons that we learned from that, but also, would you mind sharing with us some of your, maybe one tough time for you, or walking through some really difficult times in life, and maybe what that was, and then what you learned from that and how it's applied to you now?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest transitions was moving from a successful team leader and saying to yourself, well, I've been a successful team leader. Now I'm going to open a brokerage, and thinking that those same traits translate into owning a brokerage. And they absolutely do not, right? So anybody listening to me should really pay attention to this. And here's what I learned is that when I was opening my brokerage, I had to put on a whole different hat. And that hat was, instead of focusing on selling real estate and with working with buyers and sellers, I had to now focus on recruiting real estate agents that then go out and sell real estate. So your sales is now directed towards recruiting experienced or new agents. And my biggest challenge was that first 2 years of opening the company and going from making, $500,000 a year, whatever we were making, to really going negative and not making hardly anything, and saying, do I want to continue this, or do I don't run back to just being an agent? Right. And, in retrospect, I probably would have made more money as an agent, frankly. But for me, I had this internal challenge of wanting to grow something and challenge myself and do something different. And I'll tell you what I learned really quickly. The biggest lesson I learned in this whole experience of owning and growing a real estate brokerage was, in the beginning, my first mistake was trying to hire people that were a reflection of me. And we're like little mini Jim Remleys. You're never going to find people that are a reflection of you. It's just not going to happen, right? So you got to give that up. It's not going to happen. My second problem was that I thought, well, if I can just get people early enough as new agents, I can train them and model them to be top performers, regardless of whether they're like me or not. They're going to have their own strengths. So what I started doing, and I did for the first 5 years of owning my real estate company, is every month I would do a career seminar. And I would invite people into the career seminar, get them fired up about getting their real estate license. Have 50 people in the room, I maybe get 3 or 4 that would be like, yeah, I'm going to get my license. And maybe I'd hire 1 or 2 of those people. And we grew, but what I found in just the numbers of real estate is that there's an 87% attrition rate in the real estate business, meaning that 87% of agents that enter the business will not make it through the first 2 years. So no matter how good your trainer you are, mentor, coach, your brand behind you, your marketing, everything that you're doing could be perfect, spot on, 10 out of 10. You're still going to lose 87% of the agents. So that means you're keeping 2 of them out of 10. And of the 2, one of them is probably going to say, you know what, Jim, since I started with you, I'm going to go look somewhere else because I think the grass might be greener at another company. So now you're left with 1 out of 10, if you're lucky. So it was a super hard slog up a mountain. It felt like every time you push the boulder up 2 feet, it'd slide back 1, and you're just barely making any progress. So what I did, though, is I pivoted after that first 5 years, and then we started going after experienced agents. And once we started to pivot and started targeting people that had been in the business over 2 years, that maybe were doing $1 million to $10 million in production, and we can turn them from that production and help them double or triple their productivity. Suddenly they become raving fans, and now they're going to just help us recruit. And that's where we went from 1 company to 17 offices over about another 10-year span. So that was my big lesson learned and my biggest challenge, I think, overcome.
It's so interesting because that does lead perfectly into my next question, because had you in the beginning learned from your future self, you would have been so much further along, right? But
yeah,
it's difficult for us as humans, especially me. Now I'm much better at it, but historically I've been really hard-headed about, going all the way back to when I was a kid. My father said, hey, do this. It's the best thing to do in this situation. And I would go, no, I'm going to do this, which would be the worst thing. Right. And so,
yeah.
But it's not always easy for us to learn from other people. But so with that being said, let me ask you this. If you were to go back in time, bringing with you what you know to age 18, is there anything or multiple things that you would do differently that would, enable you to hit higher successes in a much shorter amount of time?
Yes. I mean, definitely when I was 19, when I got in the real estate business, none of my peers were buying real estate. They were all like kegger parties and having fun, right? They're not buying houses. So I definitely had to learn quickly from people that were older than me, smarter than me, had more experience than me. So I read tons of books, and I went to webinars, and not webinars back then, seminars, listened to all kinds of tapes and CDs and all kinds of things. And I just took in a lot of information, and then I applied a lot of that to grow my business. Like most agents, so I didn't do a great job. I did build a sphere of influence, but I didn't do a sphere of influence systematically and with really perfect organization. So what I'd recommend to agents to do today is that from day one in your business, and even if you haven't done it, start today and really look at your sphere of influence as the engine of your business. What I looked at as the engine of my business was my work ethic. And I knew that I could outwork everybody in the market. I could work harder, stay longer. I prided myself on staying later than anybody and it being dark outside before I ever went home every single night. And I was there before it got light every single day. So I was a working machine. I worked so hard, 7 days a week. But what I learned is that you don't have to work that hard. You can work smart. And so the difference today is that I understand the value of what I call Q2, which is the quality and quantity of your database is going to drive your performance. It's truly the engine of your database. So I'll give you an example of this real quick. I coach some of the most successful agents in America, people doing 80, 90, $150 million in business a year, people on the Wall Street Journal top 1,000 list. And so when you look at these people and you talk to them about their business, when they say, hey, Jim, I'm going to go list at my buddy's house this morning, or I'm selling my friend, excuse me, a $2 million condo today, they're always referring to these people as their friends, as their buddies. It's never like it's another transaction. They're not transactional, they're relational. And so the top agents in America look at their client base as their friends. And that's the difference. So when agents say, I'm not doing enough business, I can always say to them the same thing. Excuse me. The reason why you're not doing enough business is you don't have enough friends. The people that are in your database, quote unquote, they're just a list of people. You're not treating them like friends. You're not elevating those relationships to friendships. The top performers in every industry in America are the ones that have the biggest network of people around them. So you look at college graduates from like Harvard or Columbia or Princeton or Yale. A lot of times we think it's the education that drove their success. Like they learned so much there, they went out and applied it in the world. Part of that's true. But what's really more true is the relationships they created in those dormitories, in those sororities, that once they left the industry, all of them are helping each other to climb the ladder. We need to look at our businesses the same way and say, how can I quickly raise my game? The fastest way is networking, and growing your sphere of influence. And I can actually give you some numbers around this if you're interested. Yeah. So the numbers behind this, if I was going to meet with you as an individual agent, I'll say, okay, Doug, let's open up the hood of your real estate business. So we're going to open up the hood. My first question would be, how many people in your sphere of influence? Now, you should say to me, Jim, it's 132, it's 189, it's 232. You should have a specific number. If you don't have a specific number, I know that you're not really running a business. You're just trying to work hard, right? Which is great, but it's not going to work long term. So let's say you said, well, Jim, it's 132 people. I could say back to you, Doug, based on that number, I can tell you exactly how many transactions you'll close in the next 12 months, assuming you're contacting those people 20 to 50 times over a year with a different variety of formats. And the number it's a 10-to-1 ratio. It's about 13 transactions if you're doing everything perfectly. So, and normally I'm almost always spot on. It's going to be a range. They might say, well, it's 10 or it's 15, but it's right in that range. There never, ever, ever, ever will be a time that you'll say, no, Doug, no, Jim, you're wrong. I closed 50 transactions last year. That won't happen. So the only way when somebody says, well, I want to close 50 transactions, well, I can say, well, you know what? The only way you're going to get there is by having a 10-to-1 ratio, meaning you want 50 transactions times 10 means you need 500 people in your database. You got 132 now. You've got a gap of 370. That means we got to find a way to fill that gap as fast as humanly possible. There's no other magic wand or secret potion that's going to get you there. That's the path. So that's just getting down to raw kind of coaching and mentorship.
Yeah, and that's really cool and interesting and so true. It's funny that we're talking about this right now because I just met with one of my mentors on Wednesday and we're talking about that. He gave me the task of writing out a list of my network, right? So if you were to ask me how many people are on my network, I have no idea right now. Yeah. And so it's great timing there. And also this is like really, really great advice / insight. I wanted to touch on something also. This is mostly for the audience, but I guess I'll throw the question your way as well. But like, I started being coached by a performance coach, like a mindset coach with Jason Trees coaching in 21. That's really where my life started to begin to change, like so much for the better. And I have multiple coaches now. I'm starting to work with one, I think next week another, and mentors, right? But like, so for me, having coaches and mentors have been incredibly valuable. Have you worked with a lot of coaches, and what are your thoughts on coaching? Obviously, you're a coach, so you're going to be biased a little bit, but like, I'd love to hear, because typically coaches are the most sold out for being coached and for coaching in general. just because that's the fact, not because they are wanting to sell coaching to other people, right? So like that they
Yeah, you
do.
have to buy into
obviously.
coaching to be a coach. Like they always say, the best teachers are the best students, right? And so I think you have to say, if your coach doesn't have a coach, do you really want to hire that coach, right?
Great
So, I
question.
mean, that's like if they believe in coaching, then they have a coach. And so I've had many, many, many coaches. I believe you always should be getting coached, but in multiple aspects of your life, like a personal trainer. Like I always have a personal trainer of some kind, And personal trainers are the best coaches in the world because they give you so many things you can apply to the rest of your life. Like it was always great ones. They're like, if you want to cash the check, you got to do the work, Jim. I always love that's one of my favorite ones from my coach. Every time you're like, you almost did failure, great. That means you're making progress. All those things that they scream in your face when you're trying to do exercise. Yeah. I've had dietitians, I've had performance coaches, I've had all kinds of coaches in all kinds of areas, therapists, and you name it. I think there's so many different aspects of our lives that we need coaching on. And I think the way to look at yourself just as a human being is to say, where are you feeling like you're the weakest, and where that weakness is where you need to be coached. It may not be in your real estate business. Maybe you're crushing it, and maybe you think, oh, I just got to keep taking it higher and higher, but the rest of your life's falling apart. Maybe you need a therapist. Maybe you need a family coach, right? So you got to say, well, yeah, or maybe you let your health. The number one thing I see agents doing is letting their health go to crap. So you allow your number one engine, your biggest asset, to kind of fall apart while you're running this great business, and suddenly you have a heart attack and die, right? Because you become diabetic, you become super overweight and unhealthy, and you can't sleep at night. All these millions of things that go on with this. So I always say, let's treat our body as our number one asset, because when you're healthy, I look at it as corporate athletes. And in order to step on the field and be at a high level of energy, you got to have this body in shape. So I'm a big believer in that. Yes, to answer your question,
I agree 1,000% there too. Sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, it's the truth.
So I'm a big believer in having coaches in a lot of different aspects of your life. 100%.
I love that. Let me ask you this fun question: if there was a key, to success, like in other words, a key that would help someone go from a non-success or a scarcity mindset to an abundant or a success mindset, what would you say that key is for you that you've discovered?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about that. I grew up very poor, and I, really, a childhood where, you don't know what's coming next. And, like a lot of people can identify with that. Warren Buffett has got this great quote where he says, it's a good thing to have the PSD designation, which means you're poor, smart, and driven, which is definitely what I was. But I didn't start out that way. I could have went a completely different direction until I read the book, Awaken the Giant Within by Anthony Robbins. Everybody gives Anthony Robbins a hard time. It's one of the best books ever written if you want to get fired up and motivated. So in that book, he talks about limiting beliefs. And so as a 16-year-old, I read that book, and it was like describing me in terms of limiting beliefs. And we all are surrounded by these limiting beliefs, like I'm bad at math, or I'm not a creative person, or I'm not a good salesperson. I'm not good in front of speaking in front of others. And all these things we tell ourselves, and they become our limiting beliefs. I can't sell. I couldn't knock on a door. I'm not good at social media. All these limiting beliefs that hold you back from your true potential as a human being, right? And so you got to start saying, how can I knock down these limiting beliefs? What created that belief in the beginning? And how can I just completely overcome that? And the reality of it is, and what I found really quickly is it's massive action focused. And there's a great book called The Obstacle is the Way. So what is the obstacle? What is the choke point in your life that's holding you back from truly performing at your absolute highest level? Identify that obstacle and you go all in on it. I'll tell you a quick story around that real quickly. When I was opening my first brokerage, we did these career seminars. Well, the first one I did, career seminar number 1, I had a group of 3 or 4 of us. I would get on stage. I got up and I choked so hard that I walked all the way to my car, got in my car, and drove away. I was such a terrible speaker. Just tested. So I reflected back on this and I said, I'm going to make it my goal to become the best speaker I can possibly become. And so I had a friend of mine that she worked for the welfare department in the state of Oregon. And the welfare department is where you get, food vouchers and different things so people can live. And she said, well, what we make these people do is they got to come and listen to somebody speak every week. And if you really want to get better at speaking, this will be a great experience for you because they're the worst audience in the world. And so, because they don't want to be there, right? And I said, I'll take the gig. You don't have to pay me a nickel. I'm just going to come and I'm going to speak to these people and try to motivate them every week. So for every week, for like 50 weeks straight, I went in front of this group of 50 people that did not want to sit in these chairs. And I had to try to motivate them to go find a job and motivate them to get off their tails. And they would heckle me and they would yell at me. They would fall asleep and they'd walk out. But I got really, really good, really, really fast through sheer force of will and taking massive action towards something you want. And I became, I would say, a better and better speaker, to the point where I became a national speaker and spoke on many stages across the country. And I was very sought after, got hired by the National Association of REALTORS to teach all these courses. And so, there's a path through every single obstacle. You just got to take massive action towards it.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the fact that you got up and did the public speaking in the first place, because there's some statistic out there that, most people would rather, die over do a public talk. And it's like really ridiculous. Right. But it's scary. So we can understand that. Right. And then I also love the fact that you decided to get back up there, and so kudos to you on that, on both of those. You've already given us a couple, and it's interesting. There are similarities in your life and in mine. I had Tony Robbins, was around it right around the same age, maybe 17, 18, right around there. Brian Tracy, Dennis Waitley. I had access. My parents went to some of these and ordered some of these courses online. Like they were all on cassette back then. And, read a lot of books, and this stuff is life-changing. So I understand your passion for Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within, and I've read that book / listened to it, multiple times throughout the years, and it is an excellent book. And with that being said, do you have, a couple of other book recommendations and a tech recommendation that you really enjoy? One on either of those or multiple?
I think there's a great newer book out called Atomic Habits, which if you haven't read the book Atomic Habits, it's a great book. The 12-Week Year, which is another great book about time management and getting yourself dialed in. I love the 4-Hour Work Week. That's a great, great, great book. That was kind of a life-changing book for me and the way I think about time and what you can get done in a short period of time. So those are three really, I think, great books. If you're in sales, Influence by Robert Cialdini is a great book. If you haven't read that. And of course, the great book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
That's a lot of really, really good books right there. Yeah, I love that. Awesome. So as we are, coming close to winding up this, this episode here, let me ask you, please share with our audience what you are working on now, what you specialize in. And with that being said, what is the best way for our audience to, get in touch with you, to learn more about you?
So my number one focus today is brokerage coaching, and with a focus on helping brokerage owners and team leaders recruit experienced agents and retain agents. And so if anybody has interest in that, you can hop over to my websites, like elephant, realestatecoach.com. And you can jump in there. I'm also on all the social platforms at eRealEstateCoach. That's my handle. If you hop over to our eRealEstateCoach.com, though, right now we've got a webinar that's free to jump into. It's called Rockstar Recruiting. It's a 2-hour session about the best scripts and emails and texts and social strategies to really engage and start talking to high-level agents in your marketplace. So it's absolutely free. You can jump in there and check it out.
That's awesome. I love that. And, so thank you, Jim, so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you and watching you continue to crush it. And again, thanks for joining us today. And with that being said, we're going to wrap up another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. Thank you, audience, for joining us today. And please remember to make this life magnificent.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.